Hello, this is Miss Moreland. Welcome to 12.5 Day 2, adding and subtracting with unlike denominators. So it's going to kind of tie in with what we did yesterday. Yesterday we found the least common denominator. Now we're going to actually have to add them after we find out what the least common denominator are. So I'm going to give you some steps. You do not need to memorize these by any means, just kind of a guideline for where we're headed. So first we're going to need to find the least common denominator. Check, we know how to do that. We did that yesterday. The step we didn't do is we need to actually multiply the bottom and the top by it to get the full least common denominator. And then we've already done this, adding, but now we're going to have to do it the third step rather than the first step. And then we already know how to simplify. So we're really just adding one step into this. So I'm going to start with this example. It says add the following. First you find the least common denominator. You rewrite it. You add like we did with like terms. And then don't forget to check to see if it simplifies. So to find the least common denominator, I see this one has a 6, that one has a 4. Well, that means I can multiply this one by 4 and I can multiply this by 6. Or I could find a smaller number that works. 4 and 6 both have 12 in common. I don't have a preference. I'm just going to go ahead and multiply both by 6 and both by 4. Then I see this one has an x squared and this one has just an x. So that means I need an x over here. So that means I need to multiply both the top and the bottom by x. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So now I can see that my least common denominator is going to be 4 times 6 times x squared, which is 24x squared. So both the denominators now are 24x squared. Well, this one I had to multiply by 4 to get that denominator, so I had to multiply the top by 4, so the top is now 12x. This one I had to multiply by 6 and x, so that top is now 12x squared. Now that I have the same denominator, I can add them. My denominator is going to be 24x squared, and the top is 12x plus 12x squared. Right, so I added both of them and I got 12x plus 12x squared over 24x, and that's a good answer. It's okay. But I need to factor it now. So on top I can factor out a 12x, so I'm left with x plus, not x, take that back. If I take a 12x away, I'm left with 1 plus x. And on the bottom, I have 24x squared. So now I can cancel some things. I can cancel this x with 1 on the bottom. And 12 over 24 is the same thing as 1/2. So I'm left with a 2x on the bottom, and I'm left with, keep writing that the other way, I'm left with 1 times 1 plus x on top. So don't forget to be able to simplify. Again, so the steps are find the least common denominator, and this one's a little bit tougher to find the least common denominator. Get your common denominator and add across the top, and then don't forget at the end to factor and simplify. All right, so we're going to do one more adding. So first it says find the least common denominator. Let me move this down a little bit. So I need to look and see, well, they both have an x minus 2. That's good. Check. All right, so now this one has an x plus 1, and this one doesn't. So I need to multiply this one by an x plus 1, and now you can look, my denominators match. But if I multiply the denominator, I also have to multiply the numerator. So now I'm going to rewrite both of those. The denominator is x plus 1, x minus 2. I didn't do anything to that 7. The only thing that changed was over here. I'm going to distribute that x, so it's going to become x squared plus x. And now that I have the same denominator, I can add them. So I know when I add them, my answer, I'm going to get x plus 1, x minus 2, because when I have matching denominators, it's going to stay the same. And now I can add everything on top, and what's nice is I don't have any like terms, so x squared plus x plus 7 is what I have left on top. And you can always check, is something going to simplify? Well, let's just see. 7 and 1. The only thing that multiplies to 7 is 7 and 1, and that has no chance of adding to 1. So this would actually be my final answer. Sometimes things don't simplify, and you can just kind of put a little check there saying, well, I checked, and it didn't work out. Okay? All right, now we're going to move on to subtracting because it's a little harder because remember when you subtract, it's like you're subtracting that whole thing over there. All right, so I look at this one, it has a y minus 4 and that has a y minus 4. I want you to pause and see if you can figure out what I'd have to multiply the first one by real quick. So I hope you said you had to multiply the first one by y plus 2. If you do it to the bottom, you have to do it to the top. Now I have my denominators matching. They're both y plus 2 and y minus 4. This one I need to distribute a 1. Well, that's nice. That's just y plus 2 again. And I'm subtracting 4. In my answer then, I know my denominator is going to be y plus 2, y minus 4, because when you have the same denominator, it stays. And now I just have to subtract the top. So it's y, because I can't subtract anything with y. And then it's 2 minus 4. Well, 2 minus 4 is negative 2. And I check, well, unfortunately, nothing simplifies, so that would be my final answer. All right, now I get to the last one, which you can probably guess is going to be the hardest one. And the reason it's the hardest is I need to factor, get a least common denominator, subtract them, and then probably do some simplifying. So step 1 is to factor that denominator. So go ahead and pause it and factor that. I'm going to multiply to 4, add to negative 4. That's negative 2 and negative 2. Excuse me. So this factors to x minus 2, x minus 2. And that's nice because I already have 1 over here, but I need 2 of them. So I need to multiply this first one by x minus 2 and x minus 2. So I end up distributing that 1. So on top, I end up with x minus 2. And the bottom is always going to stay the same now. Now that I have my least common denominator of x minus 2 times x minus 2, subtracting 3x. And the denominator is still x minus 2, x minus 2. All right, so now I can start combining. So on the bottom, I'm going to be left with x minus 2, x minus 2. Pause the video and see what you get left with on top, and then see if you can simplify anything. All right, so when I write this out, it's like I'm doing x minus 2, and then I'm subtracting 3x. I can combine the x and the minus 3x to become negative 2x minus 2 all over x minus 2 times x minus 2. And if I were to factor the top, it would be a 2, negative 2 out front, and then become x plus 1. And notice that doesn't match any of the factors on the bottom, so I can't simplify that. So again, I didn't have to simplify. All right, and I want to get to one more that makes it a little harder. This is the hardest one. I know I said the last one was, but I was thinking of this one, so I apologize for that. But that last one really wasn't any harder than the one above it, minus the fact that I had to factor. This subtraction problem in particular is tough because there's a lot of things you can get wrong on it. So pause the video and first find your LCD by factoring that and seeing what you need. So this factors to y minus 2, y plus 2. So over here, I need a y minus 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to rewrite them both. So my denominator is y minus 2, y plus 2, and on top I have a y minus 2. I'm subtracting 4 times y minus 2, which is 4y minus 8. And the denominator again is going to stay the same, y minus 2, y plus 2. Now I can start combining. I can't get that to close, so it's going to stay there, I guess. I'm going to start combining, so I'm going to write it out on top. I know the bottom is going to be y minus 2, y plus 2. But this is where it gets a little tricky with subtraction. I'm really doing y minus 2 subtract 4y minus 8. Well, if I'm subtracting those, this is really going to be a negative. And if I distribute that, that negative and negative is going to turn it to a positive. So I'm really doing y minus 4y, which is a negative 3y. And then I'm doing a negative 2 plus 8, which is a positive 6. all over y minus 2, y plus 2. Let's move that out of our way. So I can do one step further on this and factor out the top. On top, what are you thinking I can factor? See if you can figure it out. On top, I'm factoring out a negative 3, which is going to become y, and 6 divided negative 3 is a negative 2. And I can tell that I did some factoring right because I can see my y minus 2's and my y minus 2's cancel. So my last step would be to just write my answer. I'm left with negative 3 on top, y plus 2 on the bottom. So that's kind of the toughest you're going to get to with subtracting. So go ahead and try the on your own, and I will see you tomorrow.